Hey everybody, welcome to Star Trek Fridays. It's Friday, it's Star Trek Day. Woohoo! So hey, welcome to the D. Louise book series. I'm Christina Kristina. This is where we read books and talk about books. I like series. I like to read about the character progression. I like series. We settle a storyline each episode, but we have character progression from episode to episode. We are on season 4, disc 5. We did Night Terrors. We did Identity Crisis. Today we're doing the 9th degree. And next week we'll be doing Cupid, which obviously means John DeLance will be back. So if you all could like and subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. It's been a rough year so far. I begged and pleaded for a Miracle Christmas. It didn't happen. Sorry, I probably need to get off that boat. So no children today because we're off the ground. So let's get started with the 9th degree. I have a few things to say. We have Lieutenant Barclay back in. It's nice to see him. We've always got a little Voyager-esque feeling with him around. What's that episode called? Let's see. The 9th. Pathfinder. That's what that episode's called. Pathfinder. That's one of my favorite Voyager episodes, Pathfinder. But today we are doing the 9th degree. So we start the episode in the theater. And apparently, the Dr. Crusher is acting at a scene from Cyrano de Bergerac with Reginald Barclay, and they do this whole big scene together. Apparently, she's been teaching him how to act. And we know that Reggie feels the most at his best when he's on the holodeck. So you don't realize there's an audience there at first, but you've got the two of them acting out this scene. And I'm sorry, but I don't see Dr. Crusher falling for Lieutenant Barclay. So it just doesn't work for me. It's just like they're going through the motions. I don't know if the actors felt it either. Maybe they're not supposed to. Maybe it's supposed to be a big joke. I don't know. I didn't get it. But it's supposed to be this big romantic scene where she's telling him she's going to go marry somebody else. I don't know what's up with that. It just, Data got his night before Christmas thing. They've been doing Dixon for Picard. So they decided they did all these Shakespeare, Three Musketeers with Berkeley last time, right? So now we're doing Cyrano de Bergerac. So anyways, let's get through this. I think Data's expressions represent my expressions during this particular interlude. It just, I don't get it, he don't get it, and we'll get to it. And Data says, where is it? Lieutenant Barclay's performance was adequate, but clearly not rooted in the method approach. I do not understand why everybody is clapping. And Riker says, because it's the polite thing to do. LaForge comes by and says, good job, Reg, and only 6 weeks of lessons? Crusher says, good job, period. Barclay says, we have a patient teacher. Beverly says to Worf as they're walking out that she has an opening in her workshop. Then Troy has a one-on-one moment with Barclay and says, well done. And Barclay says, well, thank you, counselor. Troy says, you've come a long way, Reg. Barclay says, after more rehearsals than I can count. Troy says, I just don't mean your acting ability. It takes a great deal of courage to put yourself on display like that. Barclay says, you think so? Troy says, there was a time when nothing could have dragged you onto a stage in front of an audience. You've made tremendous progress. Barclay says, I guess. Troy says, you don't think so? Barkley says, well, I feel more comfortable playing someone else. Maybe all of this is not any better than escaping onto a holodeck fantasy. I disagree, Troy says. This isn't a fantasy, it's theater. You used to withdraw onto the holodeck. You isolated yourself into your own imagination, avoiding contact with real people. Look at yourself now. Look at all the other people you're with. You're not just acting, you're interacting. Give yourself some credit, Mr. Barkley. Barkley says, well, maybe you're right. Okay, so before we get started, well, we have a voice overview from the captain. We have arrived at Argus Array, a remote subspace telescope at the very edge of Federation space. The unmanned structure mysteriously stopped relaying its data nearly 2 months ago. And I'll try and find a scene that we pull back, but I wanted to mention this why I thought about it, and it was mentioned to me. I'll give credit to my hubby for thinking of it. Do you realize that the main crew, Picard, Riker, Troy or Dr. Crusher, Data, and the ensign, all the people up front, they all get to sit most of the episode. Now, yeah, when Geordi comes in, he has to stand too, but Worf stands more than anybody else. Did you ever think about that before? He's the only one standing in most of the episodes. I just thought I'd bring that up. That was an interesting little tidbit there. Now, this thing is described as a fancy water heater. You know, it just looks like one of those time release little capsules, those medicine capsules, those time release ones. That's what it looks like. Or it could be a few other items if you use your imagination. But we won't go there. This is a clean show. So they're on the bridge and Data's talking. He says the fusion reactors that power the array are extremely unstable. There is a high risk of overload. Riker says, what about the computer system? Data says they do not seem to be functioning at all, sir. Worf says, Captain, I am picking an unidentified device 1.8 kilometers from the array. On-screen magnified. They showed this thing that I just talked about. Riker says, that's some kind of probe. I'll bet that's what damaged the array. Picard says, it's an emitting signal. Any signals, Lieutenant? Worf says, negative, sir. I show no activity. Picard says, Mr. LaForge, why not go and take a closer look? LaForge says, aye, sir. Lieutenant Barkley, report to the shuttle bay. So you go to the shuttle bay. So, I've complained about this before, but I was trying to show a group shot of both LaForge and Barkley, but every time they talk, the camera goes to them. There's no group shot. The only group shot is when Barkley's on the floor. So, LaForge says, Enterprise, this is Shuttle 5 in position, ready to begin a short-range scan. Riker says, proceed. LaForge says, Reg, why don't we begin the massive high-res series, all right? Barkley says, electromagnetic band. LaForge says, give it a try. Barkley says, I'm picking up visual wavelengths only between 4,500 and 7,000 angstroms. Let's try the neutron densometer, LaForge says. Barkley says, nothing. Doesn't seem to want to give up any secrets. Let go to active scan. Barkley says, no, modulation. Really? You definitely not from our neighborhood. Increase to 3.0. Barkley says, Commander. LaForge says, yeah, Reg. Thank you for assigning me to this mission. LaForge says, don't mention it. You're one of my top engineers. It's about time you got in on some of the interesting stuff. This is why I'm in Starfleet. Barkley said, there's still no modulation. LaForge hit it with a positron emission. There's a big flare of light from the probe, and Reggie ends up on the floor knocked out. So when we come back after opening credits, we get a voiceover from the captain. An intense energy surge from the alien probe has severely disabled the shuttle's onboard computer. The away team has been transported directly to sickbay, where Lieutenant Barkley remains under observation. Oops, I went too far and it got blurry. So they're on the bridge, and Riker says, any indication of the probe's energy source data? Data says, no, power emissions do not match any known radiation patterns. We have not encountered this technology before. Picard says, very well, isolate the probe and place it in tow. We'll take it to Science Station 402 in the Colan system. Worf says, Captain, the probe has begun to move. It's approaching the Enterprise. Riker says, shields up. Worf says, aye. So then we're back in sickbay. Crusher says, there was enough energy in that flash to overload your optic nerves. It knocked you unconscious. LaForge said, my visor must have filtered out. Crusher says, exactly, but there was no apparent retinal damage and the cornea looks fine. I'm still waiting for a full zero-ammo readout. I'll call you when it comes in. And then she talks to a medtech. Barclay says, you shouldn't have to wait too long for the results. Crusher says, what do you mean? Barclay says, couldn't you use a global mode in your scanner? It would be a lot faster. Crusher says, that's not possible. We're talking about human cells here, not isolinear circuits. I think you better stick to engineering, Lieutenant. Barclay says, a cell has an electromagnetic signature just like a circuit element does. Theoretically, it should work with a few adjustments. I could set it up for you if you like. And then they get a red alert. So then we're back on the bridge again. Worf says, probe now closing at 15.3 meters per second. Collision course. Data says, Captain, sensors are reading no particular emissions or subspace field distortions. Picard says, then how is it able to move? Data says, method of propulsion is unknown, sir. Riker says, Ensign, take us away. 1/4 impulse. Oh, I forgot about this. Just a second. Okay. I'll have to get to that other piece because it didn't happen yet. Well, it happened, but we didn't see it. But it'll happen again. But I wanted to mention with this. Got an itch. When you watch this scene on your own TV screens and you watch the medicine capsule float behind the Enterprise, do you think you could just change this a little bit, I don't know, into a square, cube-like feature? Because it just, I'm thinking the way this moves in a straight line right behind the Enterprise, it reminds me of the Borg cube. I bet they used the same, whatever they used to show the Borg cube going like this, they used this to show it going like this. It was a thought. And I would like to thank you all for staying this long into the video. My statistics show that most people only last 2 minutes. So one of the other channels said that we have to be positive and we have to believe that all of my subscribers are watching all of the video in its entirety. I want to know what she's been drinking because I'd like some of that too. I need some of that positivity. My self-esteem is in the basement. But anyways, that was just a thought about the Borg cube. It just looks like it. Okay, here we go. I wanted to point out that we have yet again a female ensign up here. She gets to sit down, she has a name, and she has lines. Whenever we've had males in this position thus far, they have not had lines. And I still want to know why Wesley Crusher had to go out of the season 3 episodes in. Why couldn't he have completed the whole season? Why couldn't he have done more episodes? Why couldn't we ended with him leaving towards the end of the season? Why did he have to be kicked out so early and so soon? Why couldn't it have been a really, going off to college episode? I know, it was just a thought. So we're back here. Probe now closing at 15.3 meters per second. Collision course. Data says, Captain, sensors are reading no particular emissions or subspace field distortions. Picard says, then how is it able to move? Data says, method of propulsion is unknown, sir. Riker says, Ensign, take us away from it, 1/4 impulse. She says, aye, sir. The probe says the probe is matching our speed and course. Data says, Captain, an energy field is forming around the device. Intensity is 3.2 terawatts and increasing. Worf says the shuttlecraft shields did not provide sufficient protection for its computer. Our computer may be vulnerable. I recommend withdrawal to a safe distance. Picard says, Ensign, Anna, full about half impulse. Anna says 1/2 pulse impulse. Worf says the probe is following. Picard says options number 1. We can't use photon torpedoes. An explosion this close could cripple us. Worf says recommended full phasers. Picard says proceed. They fire phasers. No effect. Worf says no effect, Captain. Data says the probe's field intensities continue and build, sir. We are in danger. Riker to the forge. Can you increase power? Now this is where things get a little bit interesting. Oops. Sorry. Now, I also want to mention that I don't know if you felt the same way or not, but did you, because we started out in the holodeck, because we started out with Barclay being the focus of the episode, did you wonder, as this episode progresses, that this might have been one of Barclay's holodeck creations in order to play the hero? Because in previous episodes, that's how Barclay sets himself up in the holodeck, as the hero of the episode. And in Voyager's Pathfinder, he sets himself up as the hero on the holodeck. Outside, not so much, but at the end, yes. But during the episode, he does his thinking on the holodeck on Voyager and Pathfinder. And I was just waiting for the punchline here, for him to come out of the holodeck and say end program or something like that. I had this whole scenario in my head. It was false, of course. And I was wrong, of course. But it was just, I was thinking that I was waiting for the punchline. I was waiting for them to start fawning over him, how great he was. Because it looked a little bit like it. Well, we'll get there with Troy after the acting, but then there's also another scene. But, they go down to engineering, and we go back and forth a couple times, so we'll just go through it a little. LaForge is attempting, sir, recommend firing full phasers. Picard says, please. Worf fires, the globes, nothing happens, no effect. Data says the probe's intensity is continuing to build, so we are in danger. Riker says, Riker to LaForge, can you increase power? Attempting to now, Commander. Isolate phasers 80 to 120. Shunt all the plasma. Barclay, 2 emitters. Yes, sir, I'm already on it. Ready. LaForge, phasers are hot as we can make them, Captain. Then we go back to the bridge. Mr. Worf says, aye, sir. Nothing. Go to warp. Anya says, aye, sir. Warp 2. Worf says, the probe is still with us, sir. Riker says, warp 2. Worf says, yes, sir. Data says the probe's energy output is overloading our shields. Failure anticipated in 47 seconds. Picard says, I'm willing to entertain suggestions. Worf says, Captain, we're dropping to impulse. And again, I mentioned this on the last episode. They always give it a little bit of a time frame. You've only got seconds to do this, or we're going to be dying. You've got little easy bitsy seconds. And if you don't do this in this many seconds, it's over. You're going to die. It's always do or nothing. It's always dramatic. And I will tell you, I don't know, because I wasn't there. I have no idea. But I will tell you, filming all this 47 seconds probably took a couple days. The actors had to do their lines, they had to get positions, they had to do lighting, get directing. All of this scenery did not take 47 seconds. But that's their time frame for this little chitty bit. And I bet if you run the clock, it's not 47 seconds. It's longer than that. But having worked in a answering service up 10 years ago, you can see a lot in 47 seconds. We'll have to do an episode on that one day. Call comes in, answer the call like you're in the office, and then back then we used pagers, and you would type a message and you would transmit the message to the pager, P/C. Please call. Person's name, person's telephone number, RE, regarding, give message. And because we only had a certain number of characters back then, it's much longer now. I think it's double now. But because we had only this much space, we abbreviated up the yin-yang back then. Like, sometimes I'll be texting people and they may think I spell the words wrong. But about, ABT, U, just the letter U, R, just the letter R, to save space. That was the thing back then with abbreviations. But anyway, we digress. So then we go back to engineering, and let's get over to this lady, see if we can do this. Larson says, Commander, warp power has been transferred to the shield grid. LaForge says, by who? Reg wanders over and does what he did, presses the button or something. And LaForge says, Barclay, what are you doing? Barclay says, Lieutenant Barclay to Captain Riker, you can fire photon torpedoes. Bridge says, maximum yield, full speed. Riker says, we're too close. Barclay says, I'm certain the shields will hold. Picard says, Mr. LaForge. And LaForge says back to him, I don't know how we did it, but shield strength has been increased by 300%. Now, just a little commentary here. This increase to 300%. Could we not have used that during the Borg period of time? Can we not save all this information for future fights so we don't get damaged? Can we save this information for Borg time? I bet we all forget it for Borg time. It should be enough, Captain. Picard says, Mr. Worf, photon torpedoes, maximum yield, full spread. They do it. The thing destroys. Barclay says, you're welcome, Captain. Barclay out. I'm sorry if I overstepped my authority. And LaForge walks away and says, don't mention it. And then we get an overview. Captain's log, Stardate. The Enterprise has destroyed the alien probe, but now we are left with the difficult task of repairing the Argus telescope. Failure to do so would represent an incalculable scientific loss. And I mentioned this already, but this is where it's in my notes, that I just feel that this whole thing was set up as a holodeck program to make Reggie the hero of the episode. And it turns out he sort of kind of is. But the whole thing just had that holodeck kind of feeling to it, if you get my drift. Hold on a second here. Okay, so like I've been saying, it feels like he's been set up to be the hero of the episode. Especially when Riker comes up to him throwing all this praise. Mr. Barclay, everyone's still trying to figure out how exactly you did it. Barclay says, well, it just occurred to me that I could set up a frequency harmonic between the deflector and the shield grill using the warp field generator as a power flow anti-attenuator, and that, of course, naturally created an amplification of the inherent energy output. Just off the top of my head, I just decided I could do this most fabulous thing to save the world in 47 seconds. Riker's like, I see that. So then we're having a meeting in the observation labs. Picard says, I'm glad you could join us, Mr. Barclay. Your report, Mr. LaForge. LaForge says each of the telescope's subspace antenna clusters is powered by its own fusion reactor, but a single computer controls them all. So all 18 reactors were affected when the computer was damaged. LaForge says that's right. They're starting to overload and it could eventually go critical. The explosion could destroy the array and I wouldn't want to be next door when that happens. Data says a standard isolation procedure would be advisable. LaForge says, I agree. We'll cut off each reactor from the damaged control system and repair them one by one. Riker says, how long will that take? LaForge says, 2 to 3 weeks. Picard says, all right, Mr. LaForge. Barclay says, I don't agree. We can repair all of the reactors simultaneously instead of one by one. Picard says, simultaneously, all 18? Barclay says, yes, sir. LaForge says, but the Argus computer is inoperable. Barclay says, not entirely. The core memory is still intact, and we could program a completely new control system. Data says, an interesting suggestion, Lieutenant. However, that approach would require more time than our original plan, at least 7 weeks. Barclay says, I could have it ready for you in 2 days. Riker's like, what? Barclay says, if you assist me in the morning, Commander. LaForge is like, sure. And then we do this other thing. I got a few points to bring up when we get here. Okay, I knew a holodeck was an expert. It wasn't the holodeck I was thinking about. So Barclay's doing some more acting, and his acting's improved, and we make a point of mentioning that his acting's improved on the holodeck. I don't know why we needed this scene, but I guess we needed this scene. I've got some other things I want to talk about in a little bit. Hold on here. So then, Reg and Troy have a little pep talk in 10 Forward, and she's telling him how much he has changed. And Barclay said it's true, he can't explain it. In the past few days, he found the confidence that he never knew was there. And she says she's proud of him. I'm glad for you. Well, I'd better be going. Barclay's like, must you? I thought you'd take a walk in the arboretum with me. And Troy says, as your former counselor, I don't think it would be appropriate. Barclay's like, I don't need a counselor. I was in need of company. Of charming, intelligent woman. Oh, good grief. I want her with Riker. I'm sorry. I want her with Riker forever. But we got a bunch of stumbling blocks before we get there. Writers. So then the next morning, LaForge goes into engineering looking for Barclay, and he's not there. So then he asks the computer where Mr. Barclay is, and it says he's in holodeck 3. And apparently he spent the entire night in holodeck 3 getting to know Einstein and going over some theories with Einstein. So LaForge says, what was that all about? Barclay says, I had some ideas late last night. I needed to consult with the computer about quantum electromic calculations. A holodeck Einstein program seemed like the best way. I guess I went a little overboard. A little? Most of that stuff on the blackboard was way out of my league, and yours too. Barclay says, not really. I just haven't thought about along those lines before. It's all pretty evident now, and if you were to put your mind to it, I'm sure. LaForge says, Reg, ever since our run-in with that probe, something's different about you. Barclay says, what, because I'm beginning to behave like the rest of the crew, with confidence in what I'm doing? LaForge says, you just spent the entire night arguing the grand unification theories with Albert Einstein. Barclay's like, yeah, but LaForge is like, Reg, something's happened to you, and we can't ignore it. Barclay says, yes, I finally become the person I've always wanted to be. Do we have to ask why? And LaForge is like, yeah, I think we do. Then we head over to sickbay. In sickbay, and Crusher says, incredible. The production of neurotransmitters in your brain has jumped by over 500%. Pre- and post-synaptic membranes have increased permeability to match it. I couldn't even guess at your IQ level. Barclay says probably between 1200 and 1450. Crusher says, but that isn't all. The corpus callosum, the connecting bridge between both sides of the brain, is so active now that the hemispheres are essentially behaving as one. LaForge says, so it's not just raw intelligence we're talking about here. Crusher says, no, creativity, resourcefulness, inspiration, imagination, they've all been enhanced. Lieutenant, you could very well be the most advanced human who's ever lived. Now, let me just fix my chair a little. It's not working. But anyway, this is where I was picturing Terry. I forget what her name was. The first name was Terry, but I can't remember the end of it right now. But this is where I started thinking about this. Can you see it? The ancients downloaded all of their knowledge from their repository into General Jack O'Neill. Does it sound familiar to you? Over Miss Bing over there. You finished? Okay, she's finished. And it was really good. It helped him build this equipment that would solve the situation that they were in. But he needed to see the Asgard to get the information removed from said brain, or he was going to die. His life became critical because he had all of this additional information in his brain. And I'm thinking, somebody has all this additional information in his brain. So how come she's not spitting out all this he's gonna die situation if they don't figure out how to get it out yet? And what happens? They don't do that stuff. They don't go where they went. They didn't go here. But they went someplace else, and we're gonna get there. I need to ow. Ow. Pinch my finger. Ow. That hurt. So where was I? Just a second here. Keep looking for a group shot. I don't see it. Now, this is where you expect them to bring up the he's gonna die if we don't get this information out of his brain. But they don't even go there. Riker says whatever that alien probe did to him, Barclay now seems to know more about the internal workings of the Enterprise than anyone else on the board. But Picard says the question is, how are we going to deal with it? Riker says we could confine him to quarters. LaForge says, how can we do that? What's he done? We're talking about locking a man up for being too smart. If he's been influenced by an alien, wouldn't that put us all at risk? Crusher says, not necessarily. It might be something as simple as an allergic reaction to a bee sting. Picard says, has Mr. Barclay done anything that could be considered potentially threatening? Well, Troy says, he did make a pass at me last evening. And Riker gets all upset. LaForge just looks at him. Well, LaForge says, I hardly consider that a threat. No, but it is certainly unusual behavior for Barclay. Crusher says, there's something else, Captain. He taught violin lessons at music school last night. Riker says, I didn't know Barclay played violin. Crusher said he didn't, not till last night. LaForge says, look, if we want to save the array, we need Barclay. Simple as that. Because until he does something more menacing, I see no reason why we should prevent him from continuing to work. And Lawson breaks in and says, Lawson to Commander LaForge. LaForge goes, go ahead, Lieutenant. Lawson says, we're having trouble connecting reactor 9, sir. It's starting to chain. LaForge says, I'm on my way. And as they're leaving, Riker goes, he made a pass at you? But you failed to mention whether or not he was successful. And she just walks out grinning with a smile on her face. Okay, so I got another thing to say in a minute. Let's show the extra for a little bit. She's an extra. She has lines. She gets to appear in these scenes with the big boys here. Barclay says thermal levels up to 177, comparable increase in neutron emissions. LaForge says, is the interface between the computer and the ray still in operation? Barclay says yes, but our computer is too slow to direct the repairs. The parameters are changing too quickly for it to keep up. LaForge says, then we'll have to try a remote shutdown from here. Lawson says, transmitting commands to the array now, sir, starting close down sequence. Barclay says, Bauer, increase the intake of liquid helium-3 into the reactor. Whoa, we've got to cool it off. Brower says, transmitting commands. The thermal levels are increasing, sir. LaForge says, one happened. Barclay says, unclear. The interface isn't fast enough. Lawson says, Commander LaForge, overload indicates on August 5 generator 5, 7, and 14. LaForge says, damn. Bucky says, I can't do anything from here. I have to find a better interface. LaForge to bridge. We're looking at a cascade reactor failure on August. Back on the bridge. LaForge says, I don't think we're going to pull this one out. Data says reactor 9 will critical in 10 minutes 43 seconds. The subsequent explosion will create a chain reaction along the entire length of the eraser. Because his ensign stand by for a jump to warp 2. Anya says, yes, sir. LaForge, you've got 10 minutes. Mr. Worf, red alert. Worf says, aye, Commander. Again, with the time frame of you've only got this many seconds or minutes. The urgency of the situation. Now, this is a good shot of the full crew. And again, Worf is standing up. All right, Picard's standing up here too, but still. He gets to sit down eventually. Hold on a sec. I got another thing to say here. So, you know what I'm thinking? So what do you think? Which chair, let's do side by side. There you go. Which chair do you like better? Which chair can do more stuff? This is what I'm thinking. This is the very thing I'm thinking when I see this. I'm thinking Stargate Atlantis, and I'm thinking in the chair. And I'm wondering if someone watched this episode and thought, but let's not do it with all the other stuff. Let's not do it with the life-threatening stuff. Let's say it's a gene. And our John Shepard, our hero. Maybe one day we'll get this back. They've been talking about coming back for years now. And they keep saying any moment it's imminent. It hasn't happened yet, and they still won't take Brad Wright back either, so go figure. But, let's see. Repository of knowledge. John Shepard in the chair. What do you think? They hit all three this episode. What do you think? But they take it a little step further. So he goes in there and he's like, computer, create this chair, and then I want a console for this one, and I want a console for this when we go through. But that was my points on that. This is one of the few times, this is why I stopped it. This is one of the very few times that we get to see a close-up of our extras in the background. Because there's usually a couple of people standing in the background with their back to the camera. This is one of the few times that they turned around and you get to see who they are. They don't have any lines, but they are one of the very few and rare that you get a close-up view of the people that are working in the background. Because most of the time, in most of the episodes, their back is to the camera and they're pretending to work on the consoles here. But this is the one time where they've actually been told to turn around and look what's going on with the captain and the rest of them. And they get full bragging in uniform. They're on camera. That's bragging rights forever. I may not have had lines, but I got to get in the uniform. I got to appear on camera. I got a close-up. That counts. All that stuff counts. So that's I thought I'd mention. So I got so carried away with the extras I forgot the stuff. Data says Argus reactor 920 reactor 928 seconds to critical. Riker says get us out of here. Picard says warp 2 ensign, and she's trying and she's pressing all these buttons, and that's when we see the extras. And she says there's not enough time. Worf says computer's coming back online. Captain says the Argus reactors are shutting down. We are no longer in danger. Picard says what happened? Data says unknown, sir. Riker's like, Geordi, what'd you do? LaForge says it wasn't me. Picard says, computer, how was the Argus reactor shut down? Barclay says, a neural interface was created to expedite the repairs. Riker says, Barclay? Picard says, computer, respond. Barclay says, I am responding, sir. I'm sorry if I caused you any alarm. It was necessary in order to secure the array. Riker says, Barclay. So not only has he got himself a fancy chair, but he's got these beams going into his head. And you know, if he was Borg, they would be actual physical wires. But Riker says, Barclay, what's going on? Barclay says, yes, Commander, it's me. Barclay says, I'm sorry, Captain, I was only trying to help. Our computer was too slow to compensate for the overload on the array. So I created an interface that communicated my thoughts directly to the neural processing unit. Riker says, what exactly does that mean? My body is as you see, but much of my higher brain functions and memory have been transferred to the starboard computer core. Picard says, Mr. Barclay, remove yourself from the computer system. Leave the holodeck. Barclay says, I'm afraid I can't, sir. Picard says, why not? My primary cerebral functions are now operating almost entirely within the computer. They have expanded to such a degree that it would be impossible to return to the confines of my human brain. Any attempt to do so would mean my death. Now, did anybody think this through? Because if he's confined to the holodeck, if he's confined to it physically, to the holodeck, what about his mind may be connected? But what about the rest of him? What about his bodily functions? What about food and water and restroom and cleanliness and all that other stuff? He could sit there and his brain could be living forever until his body dies. He's going to need water. He's going to need fluids. He's going to need the restroom. He's going to need meals. And is he now willing to confine his entire being to this, there was somebody else that did it once. That transferred their entire core being. Sung. Didn't Sung do that in Data's creator and put his entire thing in the computer at one point? And then they downloaded it to a thumb drive. But I'm just saying here, now that he's done all this, what about food? What about water? What about that stuff? So then they got to have a sneaky private convo. Then they have a sneaky private convo in the observation lodge. LaForge says he's disconnected the visual and audio pickups. We can talk without being monitored by the computer. Worf says by Barclay. Picard says, report, Mr. LaForge. It is now almost impossible to tell where Barclay ends and the computer begins. He's actually rewriting the isolinear cheats each time he extends himself a little further. Riker says, how do we get him out of there? We don't, not without killing him. Picard says, this is an intolerable situation. I have no wish to harm him, but I cannot allow Mr. Barclay to continue to act as the computer. I don't care how smart he is. Data says, Lieutenant Barclay has not yet extended himself into the engineering subsystems. It may be possible to establish an ODN bypass directly to the bridge. That still won't give us control of the ship. No, but it would give us access to the propulsion systems, enough to get us to the next starbase. How long would it take to set up? A few hours. Picard says, make it so. And by the time Geordi gets it all done, Broccoli has figured it out. And so Broccoli calls him on it. And Broccoli's like, Commander LaForge, yeah, Reg, I thought you would be in your quarters. No, I'm catching up on some work, the level 3 diagnostic we talked about. How are you doing? Broccoli says, I wish to convey to you what it's like for me now, what I've become. Yeah, try. Broccoli says, I've conceived almost infinite possibilities and can fully explore each of them in a nanosecond. I perceive the universe as a single equation and it's so simple. I understand. You understand? Broccoli says, everything. Well, do you understand how this happened to you? I believe it was a gift. I have been chosen to fulfill a great purpose. Ah, LaForge says. Do you suppose all of this has changed the way people think about me? To tell you the truth, Reg, we don't know what to think. Reg says, I've been concerned about that, but soon everyone will understand what I can do for humanity. But again, what about the food? What about the water? What about sleep? What about bathroom facilities? His brain may be doing one thing, but his body may be doing other things. We've seen this a couple of times. Q created that net. There's been a couple of different creations of this stuff out there. But Worf says, Captain, I'm picking up a subspace distortion. Picard says, Mr. Data says that disturbance is a result of a highly charged graviton field emanating from our warp nacelles. It is creating a severe bias in the subspace continuum. Picard says, Mr. Broccoli, are you responsible for this gravitation field disturbance? Broccoli says, yes, sir. I'm altering subspace in a way that's never been conceived before. I'm fairly certain it will allow us to travel halfway across the galaxy in only a matter of... Mr. Broccoli, I want you to stop this experiment for now. Broccoli says, Captain, if you'd only allow me to show you. Picard says, Mr. Broccoli, that's a direct order. Discontinue whatever it is you're doing. Broccoli says, I would rather not. I'm positive that you'd be pleased with the result once I finish. Picard has them disconnect audio. And what Riker says, how soon before the ODN is in process? Data says, I've been monitoring Geordi's process. It will be operational in 17 minutes. Grace says, Captain, let me go to the holodeck and try to talk to him. So she goes to the holodeck and tries to talk to him. Reg, I'm sorry we can't walk in the Arboretum. Troy says, so am I. You frightened us all. I'm sure that wasn't your intent. Broccoli says, young children are sometimes frightened of the world. That doesn't mean that their parents should let them stay in cribs. Grace says, are we children to you now? Broccoli says, I can see so much more than you are capable of. You should trust that, Diana. I've always wanted to earn your respect. You've got it from all of us. We don't need any more convincing. Please obey the captain's order. Stop whatever it is you're doing. Broccoli says, trust me. Joy says, how can we trust an officer who doesn't follow orders? Broccoli says, trust me. And again, I'm thinking about the food, the water, what can he do here? How can he get out of that chair if whatever? So then they go through this thing, and they try and disconnect him from the machine. They can't do it. They end up going through this wormhole type situation. And Ensign says, we're almost 3,000 light years from where we started, where we were. And I'm thinking, do you remember the Delta Quadrant from Voyager? I'm thinking, they could have used a little bit of this technology to get them home a little sooner. I know, plotline. But seriously, that was my very first thought when she said they were 30,000 light years from where they started. I'm thinking the Delta Quadrant. Do you think they're in the Delta Quadrant? And if these highly intelligent species were in the Delta Quadrant, why could they not have helped Voyager? And why cannot we get some more Voyager on TV? Wouldn't you like to see the Voyager crew on TV? I liked Voyager. I liked 7 and 9. All right, yeah, she's captaining another starship right now. But I would like to see her back with Captain Catherine Janeway, Admiral Janeway, and the rest of the gang. Wouldn't you like to see them? So apparently, we talked to this highly intelligent, highly involved thing, and Barclay enters, and he's been made a human again, just like the ancients relieved Jack O'Neill of his knowledge. The Syntherians have relieved Barclay of his extra knowledge. Um, the Syntherians have reintegrated me, sir. Alien Syntherians. Barclay says the probe was designed to instruct outsiders on how to reach this system. The technologies weren't always compatible. They failed with the Argus computer and with the computer on board the shuttle, but they were able to reprogram me. Picard says, "What do you want of us?" Alien says, "The same as you." Picard says, "Mr. Barclay, you're both on the same mission, Captain." Picard says, "Mission? Yes, sir. The Centurions are exploring the galaxy just as we are. The only difference is that they never leave their homes. They bring others here. They only wish an exchange of knowledge. They want to know us." So, tell me something. Have they encountered the Borg? Have they encountered species 8427, 8527, the alien with the big head that can change into humans? Have they encountered the Klingons before? Why are there not, you know, stories of ancient beings with big heads? Why couldn't we have just been an ancient like on Atlantis? Um, but they spend 10 days on this planet. We never actually get to see the planet. But they say after 10 days in the company of the Syrians, the Enterprise is safely returned to Federation space. We bring back knowledge of their race that will take our scholars decades to examine. Lieutenant Barclay is no worse for his experience. And then we have a little tete-a-tete between Barclay and Troy in 10 forward. Troy says, "So how much do you remember?" Barclay says, "I remember doing everything. I just don't remember how or why." Troy says, "How do you feel?" Barclay says, "Smaller." LaForge's just plain old Barclay, huh? Barclay says, "Always seem to come back to that, doesn't it?" Troy says, "You know, almost everyone has a moment in their lives." Ding, ding, ding. Ding, 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 ding. Ding, 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 ding. She thinks it's noon. That's it's rarely that she goes all 12 bings. It's very, very rare. That's why I had to count to figure out. She went all 12 bings. She's showing 9:30, by the way. But I think I'm going to put her back to 10. I spent 20 years looking at that clock that said 10 o'clock. And I put a battery in her the other day. She's always gone off. She's forever gone off. She's always gone off. So I tried to see if she could tell time. So I put a battery in, and for 24 hours she told time, and she conked out at 9:30. And I'm gonna put her back to 10 because that's where she's at for 20 years, and I'm not used to seeing her at 9:30. It just screws my head up. But so then Troy says, you know, almost everyone has a moment in their lives when they exceed their own limits, achieve what seems to be impossible. LaForge says the tricky part is what happens afterwards. Troy says you almost always feel a sense of loss, but it's impossible to carry something of that experience throughout the rest of your life in ways that you aren't even aware of now. Bagaki says, I think I know what you're saying. LaForge says, either way, Reg, you're an important part of this crew. In fact, I could use your help with a level 3 diagnostic. Barclay says, sure. And Troy says, oh, excuse me, Commander, I believe we were going for that walk in the Arboretum. So he leaves out, and then he goes over to the chess game and does the lady checkmate on that thing that they use on all Star Trek Voyagers. In fact, we have seen it in what you call it? You begin. He walks over. I wish we could do this live so we could comment on the stuff as it happens. But he walks over and he does the chess game. And don't they play this? Didn't LaForge Wesley play this with the guy once? And isn't this with the Next Bang Generation? Oh, Big Bang Theory. Didn't they try and play this on an episode or two? But here you go. Here's the chess. He moves a piece. He says that's it. So that's the end of the Ninth Degree. I hope you stuck with me. I hope you enjoyed all my comparisons to Stargate Atlantis and Stargate SG-1. Maybe one day we will get those back with us with our beloved characters before our beloved characters get too old. The same thing with Voyager. I would like to see our cast and crew together one more time before they get too old. And next week, we have Cupid. John D. Lance comes back. So we did Night Terrors, Identity Crisis, Ninth Degree, and next week we'll do Cupid, which I'm assuming is John D. Lance. And it looks like John D. Lance. So please stay tuned. Please like and subscribe. Please check out the books. All my book reviews. I could use some subscribers. I'm really desperate for subscribers. I begged and pleaded last year, got nowhere. So it would really help. Thank you so much.